We recognize that Chicanos are indigenous people to this land. We are native to this land. This is our land. We recognize that our roots are through Mexicanos, and Mexicans are Indian people, Mexica. We, as our primary focus, have identified Mexican, Indian, and Chicano culture and art as the basis of our strength. We see those groups as the only groups that are native to this region. It's not imported. It doesn't come from Spain. It's not Hispanic. It doesn't come from Europe. It doesn't come from any other area than right here. For we as Chicanos realize that our people were here and were conquered by others. We have to understand that relationship. In a way, for many, many years, our arts and our cultural expression have been in captivity, and we are going to release that spirit and let it fly free. I felt that in my arts and in my cultural expression, I wasn't alone and singular, but I was part of a total community that encompassed not only dance, but theater and music and painting and murals and everything else.
Chicano shaman freezes in the video screen. Chicano murals are x-rays of his memory. No one was there to imagine that this land of encounters called Califas would be mortally sliced in half. Mexicanos y Chicanos, nosotros y otros, los amputados del más allá. Ay, la ilusión del otro lado, condición histórica del abandono propio y las pupilas infectadas.
There is a politics for Chicanos that is, total resentment, two-way resentment. A system that feels very intimidated with the things that we do and the way that we talk and the way that we dress. Resenting that and allowing us in only if we change to be like that sociedad. And when we don't, they make it really rough. We just happen to be born in a country that isn't Mexico and that isn't too likely to open up for us completely, unless we do indeed become just like them. But then you assume that responsibility. You then are responsible for what's happening to other raza in Latin America and what's happening to other underdeveloped countries. So we're caught in that bind, and we try to use the art and the songs and the poetry and the teatro and the murals to kind of remind, people that the Chicano does have a culture. That was, to me, very liberating, because I figured you don't just have to paint or do murals or do... I think that's when I first began to realize that being a Chicano artist means doing something creative with whatever is at hand.
There is a whisper within you that reminds me of who I am. Nehuatl ni mopo, Nehuatl aik onimich kokoli. There is an altar in the middle of the street. Flowers and candles surround a video monitor where images of Aztec wrath overlap with barrio tenderness. Trazando caminos andamos entre barrios y mentes con los sucios pinceles de la memoria.
Essentially, altars have become kind of like journeys for me, because I have never picked an altar to do for anyone that wasn't important to me. So they've become homenajes, and mostly I've done them for Day of the Dead. And each person that I've picked has either been someone who was personally very important to me, or they've been done for people who symbolically are important to me. In a peculiar way, I feel as though that's why altars are the things that I do best, and why, in fact, I found my way to them. Because I think that essentially what they are is they're a historical record for me. So somehow I have this idea that people who were in two cultures and people who were creative were the same people. I felt that they were the people closer sort of to the heartbeat of culture, that they're the people who monitor it in some way, either because they express it or reflect it or study it. For me, aesthetics was the door to spirituality, because I'm always vehemently non-Catholic and non-religious, and yet I for years keep doing these altars, and so finally I realized that's just my way of getting to it. In that way, art is for me my respite from all the other obligations I might have about work that I should or could do. Art is mine.
Now the weight of winter's gone. Once again I see the sun, and the birds come out to sing, tell the world she's home again.
The heart of it, the spirit of an artistic movement springs from the earth and from the people, but then it gets channeled. It gets channeled by a knowledge of history, particularly art history. But Chicano theater goes way back. You know, we're discovering through our own research and our own studies that the first theater that was performed in what is now the United States was back in 1598 on the banks of the Rio Grande. They used to do horse dramas with utilizing Yaqui soldiers. They used to do the Four Kings of Tlaxcala. They used to do the Moors and the Christians, los Moros y los Cristianos. All of that is part of the history of the United States, of the theater history of the United States, but you don't hear about it.
I think that whether it's television or motion pictures or a play or a funny book or whatever it is, there are certain concepts and moralities that are assumed in terms of America and in terms of what those values are. And the Chicano artist is looking at those values and they're saying, well, how does that include my experience? What happened to the Indian that got conquested by the Spaniard and all the rest of the European influences that came into his life? Well, here we are. We're the survivors. Somos indios. Y sin Blakesh, tú eres mi otro yo. You are my other self. I love and respect you. I love and respect myself. I mean, I'm part of a new, what I consider the new face of the American artist. There's a new face that's trying to come through, and it's a multicultural face. It's a black face, it's a Chino face, it's a Chicano face, it's a Filipino face. And that's a different concept of looking at artists in America.
Let's face it, Mexico's within walking distance and has been for centuries. It's all part of the neighborhood. And what's coming through Chicano art is another national vision of America. It is a reinterpretation of what it means to be American. And the truth is that the Chicanos are part of the American scene and have been ever since the United States came to us.
I am from Sacra, but my parents were from Mérida. Indian poet explains to the border patrol. He is from San Fran. His parents were from Mochis. She is from East Los. Her mother was from Puebla. And so on and so forth. It's confusing, we know. Our nation extends from the tip of Patagonia to the peak of your tortured imagination.
I made the conscious decision when I was 13 years old that I was going to be an artist. And I saw it as just about the only way out of being stuck in a typical situation, you know, being from a small town, not having very many opportunities. not having very many resources. Before that, the Chicano movement, I think I was very confused. I still did not have it clear in my mind what was going on with the racism, and very cold realization that there is racism and it still is there. Once I started getting involved with the movement, I started seeing that we really have to be very proud of our cultural language and some of our customs. And so that's when I decided to do images of things that I liked, that I felt were very important to me, and that was family events, family happenings, things that I saw that were that I remember very pleasantly. Also, I wanted the Chicano audience to see those kinds of things and relate to it and feel good about seeing that kind of images that they are very familiar with as a fine art form.
I used to be del Pocatl, el mero mero, el siete máscaras, you know. But one night, someone stole my kaleidoscope and I learned this other language. Don't merely evoke the past, Grambato replies. Place yourself in the future, and from there, bien afilado, reinvent the entire continent. If necessary, turn it upside down.
I've come face to face with the relationship or the connection between the making of pictures and politics and social struggle. And so it's this kind of a situation that gets me to really change my understanding of my role as an artist, as a visual artist, and one who does not, in the romantic tradition, sit in an ivory tower and looks down and watches the world go by, and who will then make statements about that. No, I became engaged in that which I saw and painted or made prints about. I didn't distinguish me from it. I was it, involved in the historical making process, which my images were concerned with. The production of art by Chicanos now is not isolated. It is part and parcel of a world movement of picture makers. We got to reproduce constantly the fact that we have produced images for decades and for centuries and for thousands of years.
I saw the all-purpose police busting a young Chicano for breathing. El Johnny looked at them through his Alba Nene glasses and asked, ¿No más for cruising, carnal? Si llevo 20 siglos caminando. Cruising low from Aztlán to Tenochtitlan and back. Tlatuani en roller skates, aquí nomás Califa Ruiz, californiando a colores, where all realities join to become metaficción. Standing on the corner of Broadway and Hell, right where English meets Spanish, el Johnny longs for his inner carnales. Al sueño lo torcieron, al poeta aquel lo baracearon y a la Susi la trituraron los medios de información. La situación está peluda.
I started out as a painter in the street, and I began painting murals, not really with a tremendous knowledge of, I'd say, of the Mexican muralists, but actually as a solution that I arrived at for working with youth. I think I'm really interested in the whole urban situation, and the elements in an urban situation should be all, for me, incorporated into the design. Social problems like gang warfare, drug abuse, all those kinds of things are all elements of the design. And I thought, what we really need is a huge wall that would bring us all together, a project that would make it possible for artists from various places to work on this piece together, and for it to be the story of ethnic peoples in California. in the context of one another, in which there's an atmosphere in which culture is the focus and we are respectful of each other's differences. And in fact, it's a celebration of those differences. That's our hope, that we would be able to let people walk and feel the weight of the history and all of the things that have happened to these various groups, and with that kind of knowledge and understanding, be able to dream up something that is a better future, more the way we'd like it to be.
I remember, said Chicano shaman El Trance, when there was no south or north, but a continuous cardinal vertigo, and one could walk collaterally toward any image or sound. East Los, Nopalera de Neón, a medianoche, Pachuco zigzags down the corner, adrenaline down the throat, the marquee reads, Del Prado, for the avant warrior who doesn't want to quit.
Since many of the things that we did were unannounced and very non-traditional, and were done within the context of a vario setting, it was very, how should I say, very surprising to a lot of people that anything like this was happening at all in East LA. A lot of our work has been pretty much one of urban survival techniques, and one of the things that our group was primarily known for was the fact that we utilize ourselves as one of our major mediums of expression. A lot of the things that we did were essentially subversive in nature, in the sense of passing on ideas that would give people the idea that they could change things in their own lives and not have to be dependent on a lot of cash or a lot of education, really, to do a lot of things with their own life, and they weren't just helpless victims in their environment. And that in itself was political, in the sense that many people where we come from are essentially taught that they have no control over their own lives, that they should just accept a ready-made package for cultural death. And we're out to change it by example. That's essentially how we do. We present ourselves as examples, alternative examples of what the Chicano experience might be, and what it is for us, and what it is for others.
The linguistic patrol busted Al Johnny for speaking too loud in an unknown tongue at a cowboy cafe named La Esperanza. Quetzalcoatl bursts in fire in front of 100 tourists. Tlatoani, Bonzo, ni Martir, no traces of ancient cultures in town. Just the tire tracks of an old Cadillac y los chavales chapoteando con la muerte. He left the prison to become a poet, but instead they sent him to Vietnam. And now they are sending his son straight to Tegucigalpa to teach his carnales to kill their other carnales. A wounded Guatemalan refugee replies, I just don't know whether to let you know what I want. To express myself is to kill the pigeons of your psyche, to remind you who you were.
I just know or knew then that my imagery came from something that I identified with, which was oppressed people, always feeling part of the oppressed group. I drew and I worked from those inspirations. And I think that as Chicano artists, and especially myself, that we always have to look at the work that we're doing within a context of struggle. Otherwise, we get into wanting to be recognized by the same system that oppresses us. And that in itself is a contradiction. And I think that that's one thing that artists have to really resolve within themselves, because there's no way that a society that oppresses you wants you to tell them how they oppress you. The only way that they're going to accept a work that speaks about and of the oppression of people is that if they themselves can take it and turn it and maneuver it in whichever they want so that it's not so blatant, so that it gets down to just being ethnic. But ethnic imagery in its own is very safe. We've been conditioned by the society, And we talk about freedom and we say, well, when are we really free to express ourselves? When you, in your own mind, develop a consciousness and you understand the oppressive natures and what keeps you oppressed, and once you make that decision to fight for that, then you're a very, very free individual.